guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Karen destroyed my lawn with her car. Huge mistake, her vehicle gets destroyed. TLDR. Karen drives over my property and destroys my grass. I ask her twice to stop doing it only to be told off and then ignored by her. Finally, I had enough and placed a boulder right in the middle of my yard that she had no way to get around. Instead of taking the road, she smashed right into the boulder and destroyed her front bumper. She tried to blame me, but the police could see that she was at fault and towed her and the car away. I haven't seen her since, and now the boulder is loved by my little kids to draw and play on. Mess with a mama bear and you get a giant boulder to the car. The gist: I had been dealing with this woman for a long time and never exactly catching her in the act before. With where my house is located, I can tell that someone had been using it as a shortcut to get to the main road faster. I find it especially stupid since it would only have been saving her a couple of minutes at most. I had never caught her in the act, and the only evidence was my lawn had been totally destroyed. Getting your lawn run over once or maybe even twice might not cause such an impact. Eventually though, the grass dies and starts to get ripped out, flowers are uprooted, and the whole lawn looks horrible. I was glad when I changed my schedule and got to start working from home. I made it my mission to find whoever was destroying my grass and tell them off for it. It didn't take long because only a couple days later I was taking a break outside while an SUV came barreling right over my yard. I had to jump up and run in order to get this woman's attention. Knowing what I knew afterwards, I am actually still shocked that she stopped at all. Woman. What? I am busy. She sounded like I was the one inconveniencing her, and the minute I saw her haircut and large sunglasses I knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Me. You are driving over my grass. Woman. And? Me. You are destroying it, and I have had to reseed 3 times already. She didn't answer me and instead rolled up the windows and drove off. I knew she was a Karen, but something in me wanted to think that she got the message. She was caught doing something and now she would stop and take the road like a normal person. The haircut didn't lie to me though, and 2 days later I caught her going over my yard again. She stopped, which again amazes me because she seems the type to ignore and keep going or even run someone over if they are in her way. Woman. Oh my god, what now? Me. You can't use my yard as a road. You are destroying it. Woman. It looks like a piece of shit anyway. Me. That is because you ruined it by driving over it so often. Use the road like a normal person and stay off of my land. Woman. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I am very busy. I need to pick up my kids from school and there is no way I am wasting time when I can take a perfectly good shortcut. Me. For the last time, it isn't a shortcut, it is my yard. She drives away again, leaving me frustrated and knowing that she just doesn't care. Talking wasn't going to work, and I felt like any more damage to my yard and the soil would be too ruined to replant grass seed at all. I was totally fed up at this point and I spoke to my husband about what we could do to keep Karen off of our yard. Ideas like calling the police and taking a picture or video of her doing it in the act. Those things worked slowly though, and I needed her to stay off of my lawn now. Really though, I know I have been making it seem like this is all over some grass, but it is much bigger than that. Since this thing started, I have stopped my kids from playing in the front yard because I can't predict when she is going to show up and don't want them getting hurt. The backyard is much smaller, and it really isn't fair to them since they didn't do anything wrong. We finally figured out the solution to Karen, and it came in the form of a giant boulder. We placed it in our yard in such a way that there was no way she could go around it and instead would have to give up and take the road. I will admit that I didn't like the idea of a boulder in my yard because it looked so out of place, but actually it ended up working perfectly. Sometimes function needs to go over how pretty it will be. Back to Karen. I thought that I wasn't going to hear anything else from her, and if I did, it would be her banging on my door to complain about what I did with my own property. Instead, I get pulled out of doing work by a giant crash sound and I run outside to see what happened. It turns out Karen somehow ignored the giant boulder and tried to drive over my lawn again. She smashed right into it and her front bumper was destroyed. She was screaming so loud about how I broke her car, and she was going to call the police and have me put in jail. She was on the phone talking to the police, and for my own safety I locked myself in the house until they arrived. I don't know what she told them that got so many of them to show up, but I can guarantee that it was a lie. I asked them if they needed a statement or anything from me, but they told me that it wasn't really necessary. It was more than clear from the way her car looked that the only way it would have happened is her driving in the middle of my yard. Instead, they started to question Karen relentlessly about if she swerved or if she knowingly tried to cut through someone's property. If she didn't see the boulder in her way and if she was distracted by her phone or something to cause that. They knew right away that it was her fault, and I couldn't have magically attacked her car with a boulder that was in my yard. She got towed away and I was lucky enough to never see her again. I still kept the boulder in my yard because I was worried removing it would cause things to go back to how they were before. The grass and flowers got replanted, and after a while my yard started to look great again. Even the boulder that I thought was an eyesore ended up being okay and actually loved by my kids. They liked to draw all over it with chalk and paint, trying to make it pretty, as well as climbing on it. For two little kids it was like the best toy ever right in the front yard. At least I don't need to explain to them why we are the only house with a random boulder in front of it. I wish I knew if Karen got in a ton of trouble for what she had done, but I had no way of finding out. I do know from experience that a smashed bumper can be pricey to fix, and her insurance might not fork over the money to repair it. The next story is titled, "Can't remove the charge? Well, I'll just use it then." In the early 2000s, when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilize the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space, and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill. The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come next month. Nope. It was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. Same girl. She said she was awaiting word from higher ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car. I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be utilizing it. She said she understood, loud and clear, and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently, it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance, and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter such as Vespa, car, truck, SUV, or trailer in the space. Gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store. My neighbor though, did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available the 24th of July 365. He was happy for the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for "out of compliance" on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months, and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume. The complex tried to give them away at 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers, but could do nothing about those that already had them in the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend's for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and changed their name. But wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Edit as there's some confusion and people are fighting. The trailer was small. Think of 4 dog kennels in a 2x2 configuration. You could fit a table and chairs in there, but you'd scape the ceiling. It was in rough shape. This was back when the dollar store, not Dollar Tree, sold spray paint, and I took care of repainting it myself. I negotiated drop-off to the complex from the seller, and with the spray paint and delivery, I think I was out like $700. Keep in mind, this is not the massive 40-foot trailer picture I posted a few times as a reference. It's that style of trailer. Registering the trailer was super duper cheap, like around $30 and possibly even less. When I sold it to my neighbor, I got $300 or so for it. I took a loss, but without a car, I didn't want it, and he approached me first when he found out I was moving. There were a number of colleges and universities near where I rented. Most leases banned subleasing, but lease changeovers were commonplace. You go to the complex and tell management, "I'm done renting here," but instead of breaking the lease, my friend is going to do the rest of my term. You usually didn't get the deposit back as it stayed with the new renter, but you didn't an exorbitant pay a lease break fine. It also kept the apartment seamlessly occupied, without tenant gaps, which most places needed. If they sold the trailer to the next guy or to their neighbor, I am uncertain. I wasn't privy to those decisions. All I know is 2 years later, they were no longer XYZ Complex, but under a different name, and a dozen or so trailers still remained. As for the 18 months I stayed, 1 year in a lease, 6 months at month-to-month. In my state, addendums to leases require you to enter into a new leasing term, and that was not gonna happen. IDR if they charged a month-to-month fee if I didn't renew my lease, as it was close to 20 years ago. I've been month-to-month for 3 years at the place I have been living for 4. Some places charge 1, some don't. Rent can still go up, but changes to the lease that are substantial cannot take place unless I sign a new lease agreement. I have had to look up laws and advocate for myself a lot because of BS like this. The tow company was mom and pop. They were not predatory, and I knew that multiple illegal tows could get their license pulled. The minute that first tow sign went up, I was practically shoving my paperwork down their face. No way that could play the ignorance card after that. They still exist to this day and now have multiple locations. In fact, they are the assigned tower for my current complex too, ironically. Finally, storage sheds or units are required by my state to be month-to-month. It's a state law that goes back to at least the 1980s, and I have had to memorize a lot of laws regarding storage for my job. So, the apartment couldn't force anyone to keep their sheds, so my neighbor canceled at the end of his next month. Great guy. Lived in a 3-bed with a set of twins. 1 boy, 1 girl. As for this being fake or made up, I feel like I have enough specific info to prove that it's not. And if you still don't believe me, oh well. I posted this for y'all's enjoyment. I really appreciate the awards and upvotes, but I don't care about internet points. Thank you to everyone that did a thing, and I love all the comments. That's the extent though. The last story is titled, "Company Saves Cost by Taking Away Company Cars." TLDR. Large company spends magnitudes more money by implementing cost savings. About 6 years ago I worked for power supply company in the UK. I worked in a small project team that coordinated all the company's major infrastructure projects, and the role required travel to meetings all over the country. We'd average around 800 miles a week in company miles over the year, depending on time of year and location of projects, etc. Someone in the finance department had reviewed our expense claims and calculated that over 1/4 we'd not covered the required number of company miles to meet the company's policy on company cars. For that 1/4 without looking at any other data. We lost our company car entitlement and the company told us we had to return to the fleet company at the end of their leases. Malicious compliance activated. As we were project engineers, we had a very particular set of skills for knowing how to follow rules to the letter and how to do so in a manner that benefited the company or project or individuals. Usually if it benefited the company, it benefited all involved. This was not one of those occasions. We pay benefit in kind tax on our company cars in the UK. The rules around this changes as and when the government feel like it. My team had all carefully chosen out cars to be zero cost to ourselves by choosing cars that were below the allowance of £300 month, so the remaining allowance covered the tax obligation. We'd all be screwed by the benefit in kind tax changes that year and were now paying tax. So for starters, we reviewed the company car policy, and found the company had no way of stopping us handing our cars back with immediate effect, whilst the company was still responsible for the leases. So we all made arrangements for personal cars and handed our keys over at the next team meeting. We'd also reviewed the company travel policy. We started using hire cars and trains for traveling. Trains and hire cars in the UK are not cheap. As none of us were willing to use our personal cars and claim the 50p per mile. Usually we'd work a long day and book a bit of overtime or lieu to drive to and from meetings without staying over, as we would prefer to be at home even if it meant getting home late. That stopped with immediate effect. We'd only work the mandated 7.5-hour day, then stop, book into a hotel and take full advantage of the £25 food and drink allowance for dinner. Then work from home the following day as we'd been away from home the previous day, as per the policy. After about 8 weeks we were called into a meeting with our line manager and department manager about our expenses. Our expenses for the first month after the cars had been returned were more than they were for the previous 12 months combined. Our line manager agreed that our expenses were in line with the policy, otherwise he wouldn't have signed them off. The department manager told us we were getting company cars back and he expected the expenses to return to previous levels. We declined the offer of company cars and let management know we'd be adhering to the travel policy to the letter. Thank you for listening.